Welcome to Funnel This, the podcast where fintech marketers and founders learn what really works when it comes to brand building and driving demand. It's hosted by me, Sally Baker. I'm the founder of fintech marketing agency Wondrous. Follow the podcast on LinkedIn and Instagram. Just search Funnel This. Welcome to today's episode of Funnel This, and I am joined by Olivia Minnock, who is Head of Commercial and Partnership at mmob. Olivia is here to talk to us today about the world of partnerships, but also life at a startup. But before we get into that, would you be able to give us a brief introduction to your background?
Sure. So I work in a fintech called mmob, which is an embedded finance enabler, which has been around for about 5 years. Before that, I started off with a literature and history degree, so not really technical at all. Moved into B2B media, where I got to interview lots of business people and technical people. I then looked after a community of fintechs called Fintech Alliance, which was looking after, startups through to scale-ups, investors, things like that. And then that kind of found me moving into more wanting to support startups and help businesses grow. And I got the opportunity to join mmob about 3 years ago now.
Wow.
And that's took me through sales, partnerships, and kind of a very broad remit as part of a startup.
I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking in a startup, you probably very much need to take ownership of your own role and sort of make that your own. And I guess then it does tend to evolve.
Yeah, exactly. I think you get given in most startups your kind of targets, which will change obviously as the business matures and progresses as well. But it's very much up to you to figure out the best way to do that. I think no one in a startup, even though they've got lots of different experiences, no one thinks that they have the secret recipe for achieving every single goal. So definitely it's something that you have to own and not be afraid to kind of interact with other teams and see how your role can evolve over time, which is one of the reasons I like working in these type of companies.
Fabulous. So can you tell us then, for anybody that isn't familiar with mmob, a bit more about your role specifically as Head of Commercial and Partnerships?
Sure. So mmob as an embedded finance enabler, just like a very quick explainer of what that means.
Yes.
We help companies to embed different products and services into different digital channels, whether that's across payments, credit, or any of the other areas in the fintech space. We tried to make that as easy as possible. So we work with essentially largely banks and large payment companies to turn their developer portals into an app store. So when you want to adopt a new product, instead of going through reams of API documentation, getting engineering teams involved, customers can actually just come on and very quickly and easily customize products and then embed them in their own channels with a single line of code. So we also try and make partnerships between other companies easier too.
Yes.
So that's where I approach it. And so where that works with my role is I primarily target some large fintechs, but mainly it's kind of tier one banks across various markets. So when it comes to sales and marketing, it's not about, volumes of trying to sell to thousands of customers. It's more a case of these very often long and complex sales cycles that touch many, many stakeholders.
Yeah, right. And I guess over the 3 years, you've probably seen quite a lot of change. And has the sort of customers that you're targeting, has that changed as well over that time?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's been really exciting to see mmob's product develop. The company was just coming up to 2 years old when I joined, so it was very new. And also the concept in the industry was quite new as well. We were talking to customers who, hadn't even built out their APIs, let alone wanted to integrate them. So that's been really exciting, and that's become a lot easier to sell as we've seen that product market fit as well. And when it comes to the business model, we initially started off, I suppose, servicing both sides of that market. So helping customers that wanted to adopt APIs and also customers that wanted to offer their APIs to their partners. And it was quite, difficult to sell such a broad product to such a broad range of customers. So we really found a good fit sitting on top of the developer portal and targeting those banking clients. We're certainly more streamlined now.
Yes.
And in that time, my role has grown around, touching on marketing, touching on feeding into the product as well with the conversations that we have.
Fabulous. So I definitely want to come back into how your role sort of touches different areas. I guess thinking about the word partnerships, it can be really easy to conjure up images of logos and announcements that you see on LinkedIn. But at a company like mmob, what would you say the word sort of partnership actually means?
Yeah, so I think Sometimes partnerships means business development in disguise, because no one wants to talk to the salesperson, but people might talk to the partnership person. So oftentimes when you hear fintechs talk about their partners, they just mean customers. We also use that. Don't get me wrong. So our larger clients who actually have input into the product, have been with us from a very early stage, we would see them as partners because they're, impacting our roadmap. But when we think about partners, really, it's looking at, different types of partnership that we can leverage to help grow the business and grow the product. So whether that becomes marketplace partners, it could be referral partnerships we have with other companies. And it could also mean, being part of communities and ecosystems as well. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah.
I think where you talk about logos, that can be important. So I would say the first few years in a fintech, it is important for partnerships to help contextualize your product and where your business sits in the ecosystem. We're all very small fintechs trying to get our voices heard against massive brands. So, partnering with each other can really help with that and can add that legitimacy. But I think at the stage now where we're kind of 5 years in and we're looking at, we found that kind of fit. I think it's important to use partnerships to think, how can we scale the success we've had, and that's when you start thinking about, how can our partnerships take our business to the next level?
Yeah. And would you have an example of a good partnership in that case?
Yeah. So when it comes to finding the right partnership, I think you can look at, where to find your customers, where your customers are. So when you're at an early stage, you want to develop partnerships that help people understand your product. mmob is a classic example of, as long as we're doing our job right, no one sees us. So it's kind of difficult to explain exactly what we do and help people understand the product. And I've done a lot of work on that, which we'll talk about probably later. But I think being able to partner with fintechs, especially who are willing to experiment and do case studies and things like that in different sectors, that then starts to make people understand, okay, this is how mmob can help in payments or in credit or insurance or things like that. So I think some of those early partnerships we had with other fintechs have been really key. Now I would say it's looking at referral partnerships, it's looking at marketplaces and things like that. So we are currently a Google Cloud partner. So that helps being on their marketplace. It makes it easier for companies to procure mmob services, which is what we want. And it also just helps companies to understand how best they can work with us. When it comes to referrals, I think that's still something we're experimenting with and figuring out how to get right. I think the key there is, when you think about these big partnerships that you're using to scale your business, a lot of fintechs do that too early. So I would say it's thinking about, have we laid the groundwork? Have we found our own product market fit? And can we get that across to our referral partners so that they can cross-sell our product?
Yes.
That's quite a big ask for people. And it's not just as simple as like, oh, we'll offer them 20% and they'll just go and do our sales for us. I think that's the kind of trap people fall into a lot.
Yeah. And you mentioned, and I guess that ties into that, use cases are so important, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you find, how do you approach asking a partner to provide that use case? Is that something that you find people are generally very happy to be a part of, or does that take some convincing? How do you approach it?
Yeah, I think when you choose to work with other fintechs around the same stage as you, it's quite exciting on both sides to explore that opportunity. But I think even when you're talking to, a larger, say just one of your clients, I think it's becoming quite standard to ask from the beginning, if we're going to run a proof of concept with you, can we include a case study that we can actually use and show customers? I think just where you have to be a bit careful is how you want to do that. So obviously not every company is going to agree, yeah, you can put this on your website and show everyone. But some companies will say, yeah, we're happy for you to demo that to clients and things like that. So I think it's getting that sweet spot.
Yes.
A big thing that we've also done is really, well, I say we, the product and engineering team, not me, have done, is making sure that our product, which is low code by its own nature, can be really quickly and easily customized to show different demos to clients now and things like that. So it becomes less about, okay, we've got to try and build something out in every sector, and it becomes more about what ways can we quickly, with or without partners, actually show clients the benefits of our technology.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? You just need to be able to see exactly and very quickly, how are you going to bring value to me?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've obviously mentioned marketing. I said I wanted to get into that a bit deeper. My understanding is that mmob doesn't have like a dedicated marketing team. So who in that case is responsible for the messaging? In case you're listening, there was a hand up there.
So that's, I mean, it's me, but it also has to feed in from everyone, right?
Yeah.
Internally and externally. So many fintechs over the past few years, especially with the economic climate, and you'll have seen this firsthand, have kind of tightened down on their marketing budget. And I think initially for a year or so, people were thinking, yeah, we can get away with this. And now they're thinking, oh, it's kind of hard to sell when no one's heard of our product or us, right? So we're coming to a kind of new stage of that now, I think. For us, it's kind of important that marketing and sales sit together. So even if you said to me, oh, you can have like £1 million budget and hire a bunch of people, I would still want that to fall under the same function, because I do speak to a lot of fintechs where marketing and sales seem really separate.
Yeah.
And often competing and things like that, or marketing saying we've brought in loads of leads and the sales haven't closed them, or sales saying they're not getting enough leads. And for two teams that work in the same company and are trying to achieve the same thing, it seems odd. So
yeah. I mean, I've been in even marketing teams where the teams within marketing aren't talking to each other. So like, what's the risk, do you think, of not joining those two functions together?
I think what I see is, at the end of the day, when I'm doing sales activities or when my colleagues doing sales activities, you get firsthand the feedback from the customer.
Yes.
You see where their eyes light up when they see part of the demo, or you see when they kind of start to like check their emails on the call, or in person, their kind of eyes drift away and you lose them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And often marketing, unless they're in-person events, they can look at the data and they don't always see that.
Yeah.
And likewise in sales, we can be very focused on, these are my targets, my product's the best product in the world, go, go, go. And marketing has that broader outlook of actually, well, how do we fit in with the industry and things like that. So I just think, and as well, bringing in the partnerships piece in my role, I think you're more careful with who you sell to when you're going to have to manage that relationship going forwards.
Yes.
Because I've certainly worked in companies where, the sales team are just so focused on their targets, as, they should be. But then they don't think of what happens next. It's just, oh, we made the sale, amazing. And now when we're selling something so core to people's business, and these relationships are going to be, hopefully years and years long, decades long, if not, you can't really get away with that either. So this all has to tie together. And I think, yes, if you said to me, would you like some support on these areas? Maybe I would.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I wouldn't want to fracture those teams out into different areas, I suppose.
Yeah, I think one of the brilliant answer, but the point where you said, it's so important to be able to hear the things that customers are saying, isn't it, from a marketing point of view? Because hearing not only them describe their problems, but also the language they're using is so important from a messaging point of view, to be able to then use that when you're going out and talking about the business.
Yeah, exactly.
Fabulous. So you've talked, obviously you've said that you're responsible for some of that marketing effort. So it sounds like you've got a lot going on in your role. So how do you sort of prioritise what you're looking at any given time?
Yeah, it can be difficult in any startup, I think, to prioritise. I think, when I was running events and accelerators and things for startups, everyone you speak to loves to say founders should do this from day one. So then you come to the end of a day at a conference, you're like, all right, so I've got to do compliance from day one, security, marketing, sales, brand, all of the product development, all of these different things, engineering, and you can't possibly do all of that from day one. So you have to kind of have a realistic look at it. I think one thing I would say is don't be afraid to put a pin in stuff. So when it comes to prioritizing, it's very easy to think, oh, do you know what, we wasted some time on that blog, it didn't really work out, let's just move on. But the product and the company and the industry are all changing so quickly that what doesn't work now in 6 months might be worth revisiting. And I think that also softens the blow for you, because you feel like you're not saying, all right, we're giving up on all this, we don't have time, we're not going to do it. And you can say, okay, let's think about revisiting that and reevaluating it in a few months' time. I think also as a startup, what we are good at is having this kind of agile, like product mindset. So thinking about, even when it comes to marketing campaigns, what is the MVP we could do? How can we really quickly test and see if this works and then iterate on that? Rather than going into, I'm going to run a 6-month campaign about this particular piece of thought leadership. That's just not realistic for most of us, but you can do little things to test that. You can post a few things on LinkedIn, or you can attend an event or get a slot speaking on a certain topic. And it's just about things you can hopefully try and measure a little bit of success with, and then go from there and expand.
Yeah. So on the point about founders and there being so many things that they should do from day one, what would you say is most important?
So unfortunately, none of that advice they're getting is wrong. Yes, you have to focus on compliance from day one. You have to focus on these things. But I think where you can make mistakes is going into marketing and PR and things like that for a product that doesn't yet exist. So I always say, like, the first, depending on the company, but I would say for like a B2B fintech, the first year or so of the company is about the founder and the story of the business, and it's often you're looking for investment and things like that. Whereas then once you've actually got a product that you can demo to people, it changes a little bit. So I would say focusing on actually having those one-to-one conversations where you can get feedback on your product. Yes, do engage with communities. Yes, do attend events, be on LinkedIn because you have to be present.
Yes.
But I would say more than like, oh, let's get a stand at this massive conference or something like that. It's focus on where you're getting that feedback from the market.
Yeah.
But yeah, still, I mean, I'm not going to say, yeah, worry about security later, because that will bite you. So regulation,
Yes.
Security, ideally, if I was a founder, get someone who knows what they're talking about to come and support you with all of that as well.
I guess it can be overwhelming, can't it? Because there's so many things that you feel you've got to do. And as you say, very important things as well. And I guess also it's bearing in mind that something might not come to fruition straight away, but in such long sales cycles, you do have to be repeating messages over and over, and obviously takes time to compound, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the interesting parts when you're selling to large organizations. I think they say if you're selling to a tier 1 bank, there's probably, I think I've heard like lots of different numbers, but around 17 stakeholders that you need to convince around that table.
Wow.
And so when it comes to marketing, I speak to a lot of agencies and different people who are trying to say to me, I can get you thousands of leads, right? Or I can do this. And I'm not in the stage where I want thousands of leads. What I want is a consistent message over what could be a year or a year and a half long sales cycle that hits all of those stakeholders and helps them understand. So we recently relaunched our website and did a lot of work on our sales messaging. And that wasn't about reaching, obviously we want to focus on the top of the funnel and reach lots of new people as well. But a big part of it was just thinking, okay, we've had a good intros with all these companies. How do we make sure that when they come back to us, the messaging isn't lost? Mm-hmm. And also it's taking, and this is where the sales and marketing thing comes in, from a sales perspective, you can say, well, I think it was actually their security team were a bit concerned because we're a small company. So how do we deal with that? And then marketing, you can think, okay, we'll start running a campaign about interviews with our CTO about how he builds the architecture safely and securely. I think that sort of thing is where it can all feed together. So I think a lot of things we see, it's like, oh, you can speak to as many customers as possible, or you can get in front of as many people as possible. That's not always the goal when it comes to like a B2B fintech like us.
Yeah. And you mentioned, there's so many stakeholders that you have to go through. And it can be the case, can't it, that different stakeholders in that business will see mmob in a variety of different ways. So it's important to understand where that might be. So whether it's perhaps somebody has seen you at an event, somebody else might have seen somebody else on LinkedIn, and they're kind of joining all those dots together that hopefully get you on that shortlist.
Exactly. Yeah.
Your background, you mentioned kind of briefly at the start as a writer and speaker. I'm really interested to know how you think that sort of influences, hopefully in a positive way, what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of things. I think my earlier roles were really, really helpful in giving me like a broad understanding of the fintech and the wider business ecosystem. And that's something it's really hard to maintain when you work in your own startup, because, my job for years was keeping up with the news in fintech, understanding everything. I've been in mmob 3 years now, and sometimes I'm like, if it's not about API integration, I don't care, I'm not interested anymore, because we're focused on what we're trying to do. And that's so dangerous for startups. And that's one of the things that I try to bring in a little bit in my role, but I definitely need to do more, is, what's going on in the outside world. We just had a new starter recently join in product, and we've asked her to do a lot of, analysis of like competitors, the market and things. And I'm not giving her like any information to go on, and she probably thinks, oh, Olivia's not been very helpful. But it's because we know that we've only got a limited time with this new starter before they get sucked into, isn't our product amazing? These are the new features we're doing, which it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you lose sight of the wider industry. especially now when things are changing with AI, things that we thought were really unique and cutting edge, there may be other companies doing them, or there may be problems cropping up. And so I think having that outlook has been really, really helpful for me. I now try and keep it up by reviewing the news, but it's harder to do when you're out of that environment. That's why I'd still do a lot of engaging with communities, industry events and things like that. I think also, so my first job and part of my role at Fintech Alliance as well involved interviewing highly technical people and translating that into normal people language.
Yes.
And that's exactly what you need to do in a startup. And I think the sooner in your career you can learn to say, I'm so sorry, I didn't understand a word you just said. Please, can you explain it differently? The better. And I luckily, when I was like 21, 22 years old, had to say that a lot. So I got very used to it. And now I have no kind of shame, whether it's internally or externally, just saying, actually, yeah, we need to figure out how this translates into like my world and into other people's world.
That's really refreshing to hear, because I think sometimes you can feel like I don't want to ask because I feel like I should know the answer to that. But I suppose when you're, and again, going back to the point about so many different stakeholders, it might be that a technical person that you're selling to does understand all of that language, but then perhaps somebody in the procurement team might not. So you have got to make sure that you're explaining things and in a way that everybody can understand, don't you?
Yeah, and I think a big insecurity that we all have this insecurity, but that you see with sales is like I think I thought at the beginning of my role in mmob that I had to own the whole process, and if I wasn't owning the whole process, I wasn't helping. Whereas you get very comfortable very quickly of saying, okay, I'm just going to have our product lead talk to your product lead because I don't quite get what's going on, and you're still part of it and you're doing that translating. But I think the sooner you can get an engineer to speak to the partner's engineer, that changes things completely, and it's also respectful of everyone, including your clients and your partners, to say, I'm not going to pretend I'm the expert on this. Let me bring in one of our team who is.
Yes.
We can talk through that.
So you mentioned about AI and how it is getting easier for companies to copy, I suppose, products and more people doing the same thing as what you're doing. So therefore, how important do you think storytelling is as a differentiator?
Yeah, I think where storytelling comes in is around building trust, I think, because yes, we have very impressive no-code technology which builds user interfaces and things like that. That's something that's starting to come up a lot more now with AI and being enabled. And we're certainly also bringing that into our product, which again is why you need to be aware of what's going on externally. But there are a lot of elements of our product that we know do give us an edge. So it's about being secure, it's being enterprise ready. We focused on compliance. I say I wasn't there, thank God. We focused on all these compliance certifications from day one because we knew the goal was to sell into tier one banks, and the goal was to enable embedded financial services, right? Not just kind of a few widgets or, pieces there. So I think having that security, that trust, that regulatory awareness is really important, and that's where storytelling comes in. And it's about how do you build that trust with banks, because you've heard these stories and I'd say no one gets fired for hiring IBM, and banks all want to be an early adopter of something that they've seen another bank adopt, so they know it's not going to crash and ruin everything, right? So it's that balance, I think, and so storytelling will always be important in that, and also just about making people see that you do understand their priorities. And when you are using AI, you haven't just slapped .ai onto your company. I don't think we're going to become mmob.ai. A lot of companies are, which is fine, but I think we will just always take that measured approach and say our story is that we want to understand their goals, and then use whatever relevant technology can help them achieve that.
Yeah. And we've obviously spent a lot of time so far talking about talking to potential partners and understanding what their problems are, etc., etc. But of course, signing a deal is only half of the story, isn't it? And arguably, I guess, more important is then how do you activate, how do you retain those partners? So have you got any examples perhaps of where partnerships can break down after the deal's been signed?
Yeah, I think generally, and I touched on this a bit before, it's what is the motivation and incentive. So let's take a referral partnership as an example. It's very rare that a salesperson in another organisation is going to say, oh, I'm going to get 20% of 20% of the commission of this, so I'm going to really try and sell mmob or wherever the product might be. And I think you need to take a step back and think about, rather than signing up to lots of these type of partnerships, think about where are the partnerships where we enable them to sell and we enable them to serve their customers better. I think the one thing I would say about where partnerships fall down, or actually I'll say two things. One thing is, again, not having all the different stakeholders on board. And that sounds obvious and everyone says it, but it still happens where the partnerships team think this is a great idea, it's great for marketing, but no one else has really bought in. So that's when you do a lot of marketing around something and it doesn't really have many returns. Equally dangerous could be if both CEOs think it's a great idea, but they haven't fed that down to the teams who are going to in practice implement this. And then I think also it's about that openness and that not understanding. I mean, you said earlier that, people sit often not understanding things in meetings and going, and no one wants to admit that. And I think it's whenever you get that feeling in your stomach that something's kind of not been said and no one says it, that's not a helpful data-driven answer, but that's the truth at the end of the day. And I think the sooner you can talk to people one-to-one and just say, I don't think this partnership's going well. Let's revisit, what do we want to get out of it? Is it still working? Completely fine if it's not and we want to end that partnership and do something else, no hard feelings. But I think that's key, because also especially when you're partnering with other fintechs, less so with larger organizations, but with fintechs, their strategy can change every 6 months or every 3 months. So it could be that they were really focused on the parts of their product that are relevant to your partnership, 1 week. And then a couple of months later, that could change. So I think it's continue checking in and saying, is this still the priority? Are we still on the same page?
And have you found, sort of as the business has evolved over the time you've been there, has your qualifying criteria perhaps sort of narrowed a little bit? Have you worked out what really works for you and sort of identified where perhaps you don't want to go?
Yeah, I think there are two things. I think it's identifying how much you have capacity for in terms of the number of partners.
Yeah.
It's never going to be the case that I'm going to have time to manage 5 different partners every week and check in with them all the time and stuff. So it's thinking about that. And also I think it's less about the partners, more about readiness on our side. So if I was to join the Google Cloud Marketplace or another marketplace like AWS or something again, what I would probably do is spend a lot more time preparing for that in terms of, is our go-to-market strategy correct? Have we got all the materials lined up? If this is something I find complex to sell, other people are going to find it even more complex to sell. So I would it's not necessarily about not going ahead with that partnership. It's about just making sure you're ready and on the right page. I've worked really closely with Google, who we are partnered with, to understand what benefits their customers, what benefits their teams, and how this all works together. And they've been really helpful with that. And I think now going forwards, I would think a lot more about that initially myself, and then I'll go into partnerships.
Yeah, fantastic. I suppose kind of trying to wrap all of that up together, thinking about commercial and partnerships. If somebody was going into a role in one or both of those areas, what particular advice would you give them, perhaps if they've not worked in that type of environment before?
I think in a role like commercial and partnerships, you are kind of the external piece. Obviously, you've got the CEO, you've got some other leadership, but I think you're the main external party in the organisation, while a lot of people are head down coding all day or, building product and things like that. And so I would say to someone going into this role, remember that you are not just the mouth, you are the eyes and ears as well.
Yeah.
I love talking, obviously. A lot of us do in partnerships, but I think it's not just about, I've got to put my message out there. It's also about listening and learning and taking in what's going on in the industry, and how do you feed that back into the team. And I've had to do, I actually did a course in product management because I was thinking, I'm getting all this feedback and it's really useful, but I don't really know how to explain this to my product colleagues and help them to understand how it could feed or could not feed into the product. So yeah, I would say it's just as much about what you're taking into the organisation as well as the output.
Brilliant answer. And is there anything that you would say perhaps that you should just let go of and not put as much focus on as you might otherwise think?
Yeah, I guess it's on a micro level in terms of your own career, but also as a company, it's comparing yourself to others. Obviously, we have to do that.
Yeah.
We have to think, where do we sit with our competitors and stuff. But I think what works for different fintechs won't necessarily work for you. And so it's about filtering through that and thinking, okay, these guys have got a massive budget. There are all these events. They're doing all this stuff. And then peeling back the surface thinking, I don't know, their product could be very different to ours. It could be a very simple SaaS product that sells thousands every day. But also sometimes you peel back and you go, oh, actually, they haven't made that much revenue and things like that. So I think it's just about thinking, take all of that on board, look around, what's everyone else doing, and then filter that and what actually works for us and our customers.
I think that's really great advice. And often, even if somebody seems to be very present in the marketplace, you might not actually understand whether that's been successful for them. So you do have to be very careful not to get caught up in that, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's not something as with an editorial background, I understand how having good PR massively helps, but doesn't necessarily always get backed up by the product.
Yeah, I think it's just the right time and the right place to look at what's going on. Of course, it's important, as you say, but understanding when's the time to look at it and when to let it go and not let it, you need to sort of stay blinkered on what you're doing as well to a certain extent.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Olivia, it's been the most wonderful conversation. Thanks so much for your experience and insight into the world of partnerships and also life in a startup. Thank you very much for joining me.
It's been really nice. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Funnel This. Follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed it, do share with someone else who might find it useful too. See you next time.